Hi guys, welcome to session 47 of Java Full Stack Made Easy. In this session, as discussed, we will be talking about arrow functions. So previous session, we talked about the callback functions. So at the end, I told you that we will be discussing about the concept of arrow functions in JavaScript. It's kind of what a lambda expression in Java. Fine. So since we already know the concept of lambda in Java, so understanding arrow functions would be much more easier in JavaScript. So let's go ahead and understand the concept of arrow functions. So the last example I gave you was about a simulation that simulated uh, fetching the data from a API. So I'm just going to clean up everything that is written here, and then we will talk about the concept of the arrow functions. So arrow functions in JavaScript are fat arrows, whereas the lambda functions in Java was thin arrows. So what do I mean by fat arrow and thin arrow? So this is a thin arrow and this is the fat arrow. Fine. So in JavaScript, this fat arrow is supported. So let's go ahead and understand that why to use it, where to use it, and uh, what is it all about. So since we have already discussed that arrow functions are shorter way to write functions using a fat arrow. Fine. It's just a shorter way of writing the functions, anonymous functions. Now, why is it used? Why to use the arrow functions? Arrow functions allows us to write less code, and it is easier to read, and it is especially for small functions. It'll be easier to read. And where should we be using these arrow functions, right? So these arrow functions are useful in callbacks or maybe array methods and codes where you don't need bigger functions, where this is the places where you can make use of a arrow function. Let's see a very simple demo to understand the concept. So let me write a normal function that we generally write in JavaScript. Okay, so my function it just does what, maybe just adds two numbers or something. So let's say a function add and just does a and b. Okay, and I'm gonna say that this function would return me a plus b. Fine. So that's how a normal function looks like, right? And similarly, what I want is, as I told you, that arrow functions or what, it is a shorter way of writing the things, right? Writing a function. So let's see how can we in fact create a arrow function for the same. So if I want to create an arrow function for the same, this is the syntax. Fine. So what I want a function that takes two arguments. So let's pass in two arguments here, the same arguments a and b. So let's call this as arrow function. And I want this to return a plus b, so that can be directly written without a return keyword. Fine. So we are done with writing a arrow function. So it's just a shorter way of doing this, where I had to return a function, name of the function, and all this stuff. Now, how am I going to call this, right? So arrow function does not have any name. So calling this add function is easier. That is, I can simply say what console.log. Let's call the add function with two arguments, that is 10, 20. So that gives me a result, no doubt, 30. But how am I going to call this arrow function? So we know that in JavaScript we can um, create functions as a variable. So let's call it as result is equal to. So this way, whatever is the result of this arrow function is stored into the result. We can simply call the arrow function by saying that it is the result. Fine. That's a result. Now we can pass the argument to the result as well, right? So we can say 70 comma 30. So that should be 100. Save it and you get the result 100. So this way we can make use of JavaScript arrow functions. Fine. So let me copy this and put it into the repository for a better understanding. So this is our day 47, session 47. So let's create a repository for the same. So let's call it as day 47 and demo 1 arrow functions. So here is a normal function and here is an arrow function, and the creating functions as a variable concept is again reused in here. If you remember, in one of the example I told you JavaScript functions, JavaScript variables can be created as functions as well. Fine. So let's now see a simple arrow function that takes just one argument. Fine. So let's understand that. So this was the syntax I used for an arrow function. So what you can actually do is you can create even shorter arrow functions by skipping even these things that are given in here. Okay, so let's see how do we do it. Let me just clean up everything that I have written here and create a very simple function. Maybe I'd like to create a function that squares the given number. So let's create let square equals 2. Fine. So I'll say user is going to give me one argument. Let's call it as x. And then we'll say x into x. Fine. And let's call that function console.log. And there we go. We'll call square and then pass in the number. Maybe the square of 2 is what we want. So there we go. Square of 2 is 4. And similarly, we can call it multiple times as well. Sorry. 2, 3. So give me the square of 4 as well as give me the square of 5. Save it and there we go. Fine. So that way it will be much more easier to create a arrow function that takes only one argument, where we are actually skipping the parentheses that are there with the normal arrow function. So it can be created in a more shorter way when we have just one single argument with it. Fine. So let me just copy this and put this into the repository and call it arrow function with one argument. Demo2 arrow with one argument. All right. Similarly, what if there are no arguments into a arrow function? Fine. So an arrow function taking no argument is kind of what where it will be used. It will be used in simple functions like maybe I want to just print a message or something. I can create a arrow function that takes no argument at all. Okay, so for such type of functions we can use the empty arrows. So let's understand that empty parenthesis and creating the arrow. So what we can do is we can simply create arrow functions like this, and then we can say, let's say console.log and say welcome user. So things like that. Fine. And to call this particular function, what we can do is we can store it into a variable and then call it. Let's say this is what welcome, or maybe say hello function equals to, and you just call the say hello. That's it. So that should print me the result welcome user. So this way we can create arrow functions without any argument. So if the arrow function is without any argument, then we can skip the we can write the empty parenthesis, and this will generally be used for printing simple messages. So let's copy this and put it into the repository and call it as arrow function with 0 arguments. Demo3 arrow with 0 arguments. Yeah, in JavaScript, one more important point which I have not discussed is immediately invoked functional expression IIFE. I encourage you, if you want to learn a detail about JavaScript, IIFE also will be helpful, and the entire jQuery is created on the concept of IIFEs itself. Since my focus is on Java full stack, that's why I'm trying to shorten as many things as possible. So in future, we will definitely be talking about the concepts like the arrow functions, or maybe the callbacks and the promises and everything. So because of which I am shortening whatever I can. Okay. So, but if you want a detailed series about JavaScript, maybe I'll release that later, which includes everything that is there in JavaScript, a language of internet. So let's now create arrow functions that takes more than one line. So there can be arrow functions which with the uh, multiple line arrow functions can be created. For more complicated functions, arrow functions can still be used where the arrow function's body has more than one line. Okay, so let's go ahead and understand that. So let's say I want to create an arrow function once again. Let's pass in two arguments to it and create an arrow function. And now this arrow function in the previous example, I just did a plus b and then had only one line in there. So what I want is now I want let's say sum of the two numbers that are given. I want to get that as a and b, and also I want to get the uh, product of this. Okay, which is gonna be a into b, and yeah, I just want to print these things. So what I'll do is I'll say return, and if you remember ES6 ECMAScript 5 versus ECMAScript 6, the differences I told you, and then I told you template concept of template variables and everything. So let's use that. So I'm using something like, let's say, sum dollar sum, which is gonna be what, this variable, right? And yeah, one important thing here should be this. Fine. So similarly, what I want is I also want to print the product, so it's gonna be product and then the product, so which is gonna be dollar brackets product. Let's save it, and since I'm returning all of this, let's save it into a variable and consider that variable as a function. So let's call it as calc equals to, okay, and then we will call the calc, and it's gonna be console.log a calc function with two arguments. So let's pass in what, 4 and 5. 4 plus 5 is 9, and 4 into 5, that should be 20. Let's save it and go to the browser and see the result. So sum is 9, product is 20. So in this example, ES6 template variables are also used, and also what I'm using is I'm creating a arrow function with multiple lines. So whenever you have a more complicated logic to be implemented, then you can create arrow functions with multiple lines as well. So arrow function does not restrict you to be used with shorter code. You can create more complex logic into arrow functions as well. Okay, so let me copy this and put this into the repository and call it as arrow function with multiple lines, demo for arrow with multiple lines. And also ES6 template driven variables are used here. All right, so now this one limitation about the arrow function is that they don't have their own data. That means see, in JavaScript, what I can actually do is I can create classes in JavaScript. Okay, so this is all possible in JavaScript. Class a, and then I can do a console.log, and then I can create an object of this, call the function of this particular class and everything. So it is all possible in JavaScript. Fine. So since after this we will move to the TypeScript, there we will be talking about a lot of classes and everything in uh, what you say in TypeScript. So the same thing can be used in JavaScript as well. The objects, if you remember in the previous example, I created one of the player object, right? So objects can be created, classes can be created, but with arrow functions there is one limitation, that is arrow functions cannot have their uh, uh, own property, that is own the this keyword cannot be used in there. So let us see that with one simple example. So what I'm gonna do is I'll be creating a object. So let's create an object like this, and we know that an object is of name value pair, right? So then comma, and maybe something like a role or something which I created in the previous example. So Virat and batsman. Fine. So let's create it as let player equals to. The player object I'm creating here, and since I've created this particular player object, and in this object itself I can create more functions as well. So let's create a function here, And the function name, I'd probably like to have what? Let's say, yeah, let's create an anonymous stuff function, and let's call this as old function, or maybe a normal function or something. So key is old function and then the value. So it should be created as a key value pair. So I'm creating something here. Similarly, I will, after this, I will be creating again a comma. I'll be creating an arrow function. So let's call this as arrow function. That is going to be a key and then the value. So we know that if it does not take any argument, empty, and then the arrow and then the value of it. So what I want to do is I simply want to have this particular function created here. And in this function, I would like to print some name and role of this particular player. So let's do a console.log and try to print the name of the player. So if I just say, sorry, it's already there in the player object. So if I just say name here and also the console.log name here, let's understand that first. So this is what I want to do. I am just doing this, and now I want to call this object player, and then from that player I want to call the functions that I have created. So that can be called like player dot old function. Fine. So let's see the result of that. If I call the old function, it does not print me anything, undefined thing. Similarly, if I call the what arrow function, that should also not print me anything. So save it. So that also does not print me anything. Looks good. Now in the old function, what I'm gonna do is I will be writing it as this dot name. So let's save it, and we got the result as Virat, right? So in JavaScript, it is necessary to give that this keyword. You have to give it so that it understands that it is a variable. It's its own variable. Same thing I will try to implement into arrow function, this dot name. And now also you can see, even though I include this keyword here, still the arrow function is unable to print that name, that is Virat. So that's because arrow function does not have its own this keyword. Okay. Uh, Undefined, it's still empty. Okay. Why is that? Because arrow don't have its own this. Fine, so you should be careful while using arrow functions within the objects like this. Fine, so do remember to use these arrow functions. Do remember this limitation. So uh, it avoids this keyword avoids the confusion, right, inside the object or the classes. So arrow functions do not create their own this. So they are actually surrounded with the scopes. Let me just copy this and put it into the repository. And do remember, whenever you are in such situations, do not use arrow functions. That demo 5, this with arrow. So you can see that a normal function is able to call the variable, whereas arrow function is not able to call it because it does not have its own this keyword. So because of which you can avoid it using there. So it can be specially used for the what callbacks and everything. That's the place where it is fine to use arrow functions. Now let's also check uh, using arrow functions with the array method like we have done in the previous case. Fine. So what you can also do is since I've not done all of this before, what you can do is you can try and create things like this in JavaScript. You can create class, call it as a player. Okay, and then create a function, maybe let's call it as an old function, and just do a console.log. and print a name here and create let name equals to Virat. Okay, as for now, I'll just comment this. And there's a function under the class player. So player is equal to new player is what I'm creating here, an object and the property. So then the player dot old function. Let's save it and call it here and see what is the result. So I'm trying to call the name, nothing happens. I do a this dot name, so I get Virat. So writing a this keyword is compulsory in JavaScript. So this is how a JavaScript class looks like, declaring the property looks like, creating function looks like. So if you remember, I told you that in JavaScript, functions can be written even without a function keyword, right? So that is inside the classes. So in the previous example, what I did was I created the object directly and then gave the old function and everything. So if it has to be created with a class and then give a old function and the other stuff, we could have given it like this. Fine. And creating an object would look like this. An object reference and then the object like this. Fine. So hopefully that is also clear to you. And also one more important point in JavaScript is that if we want a constructor to be created, we can create it like a with a constructor keyword and then just say console.log I am the constructor, right? So save it and there we go. You can see that I am the constructor is being called without this being called. So if I in Java, what we used to do is we used to create constructors like this, right? So here it's not a constructor now. So constructor is not being called. So in JavaScript, the constructor is created using a constructor keyword. So in future, if I use constructor and all that, do not get confused what exactly it is. It is just a constructor in JavaScript. So I'll add a demo 6 and I'll call it as JavaScript classes and constructor demo 6 JavaScript classes and constructor. So do remember how do we create a JavaScript class? How do we create a constructor within that? Properties creation inside the class and then creating functions within the class, creating object of that particular class. So these are the ways how do we deal with the classes in JavaScript. So I just wanted to give you one idea about using classes in JavaScript so that it will be easier when I try and create classes in my future demos and also create the objects, or maybe I call the properties and objects and everything. It should be easier for you to understand that in future. So it slightly differs from Java, but still almost most of the concept will be similar itself. Now I'm going to use another arrow function with the array method, like I used a callback function with the array method in our previous session. So let's create the exact same example. So I created something like what let number, right? Let number equals to I created an array with 1 2 3 4 5, right? So if you remember that, and I printed the number and then I mapped this, transformed this and used a map and got the square of the numbers. Fine. So if you go back and see that demo, you will realize how short it has become now. So what I'm going to do is I'll say let squared number and this squared number equals to the numbers dot map. Now, so for map in the previous example, I created a function here, right? If you remember the function and everything I created, but now as a callback function, I just want to use what I want to use this num, or maybe let's just call it as n, and I want to say n into n. So that's what I want to do in a arrow function, and I'll just do a console dot log, and then I want to print the squared here. Fine. So let's save it and there we go. You can see it is 1 4 9 16 and 25, which is a squared number of the uh, array that I have given. Okay, so 1 4 9 16 and 25. So likewise I can make use of filters or anything that I want. Fine. So I think in callback functions I did not show you the filters, but in Java during streams we have already discussed those things. So I don't think again we have to discuss that thing. So what if I want to just print the odd or the even numbers from here. So just say even, and then instead of map, let's go ahead and use the filter. And then what I want to do, I want to just say retrieve me, filter me all those records that are divisible by 2, and the modulus remains 0. So let's get the even numbers only. Save it, and there we go. So we got the even numbers out of the array, and then we got the squared of the array. So this way we can either transform the data by using maps or filter the data by using filters. We can make use of the arrow functions to shorten these features of transforming the data or filtering the data. Fine. So let me just copy everything and put it into the repository. Let's call it as demo7 arrow with array functions. All right, so if you remember, once again, I created what? I created an event in my previous example where upon clicking of the button, I executed this runs after 2 seconds and all that. So can that again be used with the arrow function? Yes. So we can just replace that stuff where I had written the uh, inner function with the arrow function. So if you go to day 46, you will see that. So if I go to day 46 and it should be day 45. Yeah, event callback is already here. So if you see, this particular function is being passed here, button clicked and everything. So I'll copy this and put it here. And now what I can actually do is I can replace this function with a arrow function. Fine. So what we can do is we can write an arrow function like this, save it. Let's go to the browser and get a button, click on this, the button clicked. So this way we can easily replace the functions, the anonymous functions that we have created in our all previous examples with the arrow functions. Fine. So arrow is what? It's nothing but a shorter function which might take arguments, which might not take an argument. If it does not take argument, what we do is we provide empty parenthesis. If it takes only one argument, we can skip those parentheses and directly write the variable name. It can also take what? It can take multiple lines, can contain the return statement as well. But it does not have its own this keyword. So we should be careful inside uh, classes or objects whenever we are using arrow functions. So but this arrow functions are perfect for what? The callbacks or maybe array methods or events and timers. So this is where we can make use of the arrow functions. So hopefully the concept and the syntax of arrow functions is completely clear to you. So I will once again put this example also into the repository so that you understand that the arrow function can easily be replaced. Sorry, the callback functions can easily be replaced with the arrow functions. So it should be there in our day 46, right? Uh, no, it should be day 47, right? Yeah, day 47 I created demo 8. So this is what I did the event, right? So arrow with event. All right, so let me just put that and we are done with this. So you should just go ahead and just recap this thing. Also see how classes are created in JavaScript, how objects are created, and how properties, how functions can be called, properties of this particular player can be called. I can even do a console.log and then do a player dot name and all that, and it prints me Virat. So it's quite similar to what we did in Java as well. So hopefully you're able to catch up with the concept of JavaScript that are being demonstrated to you. In our next session, what we will do is we will not waste much of the time to go to Angular. So in the next session, we will set up our Angular environment and see how we go ahead with the concept of Angular. And in Angular we will be using TypeScript, which is similar to JavaScript itself. TypeScript basically gets converted into JavaScript when we are executing it. So in the next session, let's talk about the next UI technology, or next, or we can say the last of this particular series, Angular we will discuss and see how simple Angular applications can be used, and also we will connect our Angular application with the APIs. Fine. So as the time progresses, we will go end to end with Angular. See you in the next session. If you're liking in the series, do subscribe to my channel and help me gain more subscribers. Thank you.